To the left, we have the TCL Q7M. To the right, we have the Samsung S95D. We're showing you HDR between the two, and I'm going to just say this right now. I didn't expect it to be this, now I wouldn't say close, but high quality from TCL as far as the HDR goes. I'm watching Arcane Season 1, Episode 6. Fantastic show. If you haven't gotten into it on Netflix and you have a Netflix subscription, I highly recommend you jump into it. Now, if you look at the colors, I think that's where things really get interesting. So I got to get a little clever here, and you got to do some fancy pause and play stuff, but you can get an idea. Warmer tones here for sure, cooler tones there, but the contrast is pretty much identical, only giving way to brightness in this particular scene, which again is a win for TCL. Now, when we talk about highlight detail, there is a vast difference between these two displays. Obviously, the Samsung S95D over here is just going to look way better. But TCL, again, with the contrast does look good. But again, if you're in it for HDR, this is where you might be disappointed. And maybe you might want to step up to the TCL QM8, because the QM8 51G, it just looks better. And there's no other way to say that. It just looks better for brightness. And this lack of brightness is really making a lot of the scenes where you would have a bright, beautiful highlight feel very unimpressive, dead, and lifeless. And this is now where you're starting to see it become more of a $500, excuse me here, more of a $500 TV versus something that's at the most premium end. This would probably be a great way of illustrating the highlight differences between these two displays. The image to the left, very dead and lifeless. The image to the right, very bright. You can see rich highlights coming from the sun, almost, again, creating a little bit of a vignette around his face, and the rest of the shadows is dark, giving you that sunset feel, again, as you sit down in a shadowy part of the city. It just has more expression. And if it's the one thing I could nail home about the TCL, it's just missing lighting. And that is the one thing I think that could probably save it, if anything. In moments like this, however, colors can be very rich on the TCL Q7M for HDR comparatively to what we have on the S95D. And I think that's where this becomes so interesting. There are truly moments where colors are just richer on the TCL than what we get on the Samsung, which is the total reverse almost from what we saw on HDR. I mean, the blue is more rich. It's not more vibrant, but it is more rich. It doesn't have the same level of luminosity, but all of the colors, and I mean literally all of the colors in this example, are way more visible on the TCL, whereas Samsung, because they're pushing out the higher brightness, they're kind of getting colors wrong, and you're losing the detail within the colors, which I don't even think I have to point to it, but I will. The background here, so picturesque out of a comic, and this, you miss all of that. This is the difference between HDR versus HDR. Now again, in the interest of fairness, just to show everybody what's up, I'm going to actually show you what the Samsung would have looked like if we would have stuck it in one of the default modes like Filmmaker, just so you can get that idea. This is what it would have looked like. Again, you don't really have any gain as far as the color at all. And even though you dim it down, it doesn't increase the richness of the color. So again, a lot of people think that maybe just turn down the brightness and it will explode. Not necessarily. Again, turning down the brightness does do some good things for the picture quality, but not in every example. And let this be a good example of that. And again, it still looks pretty great. I mean, at first glance especially, and for pretty much all the other scenes, it's just in certain examples, TCL is going to pull ahead. Now, to be fair, I am making the difference here with my settings, because let's go to something like their IMAX Enhanced, right? This is, you can't set anything, so there are no picture options to set. This is what they think an IMAX Enhanced picture looks like. So, I mean, obviously there's some work to be done there. It's very cool, very blue. And again, we'll show that off in maybe the next scene, but yeah, it doesn't look great. As you can clearly see, the TCL lacks a lot in the way of the color. Background detail, however, is just better. And this is where it becomes mind-blowing for me personally, because even though this is IMAX Enhanced and it doesn't look the best, look at what happens when we put it back to where I had it for HDR. And again, for anybody wondering why I'm using the sports mode, is because unfortunately with TCL, they don't have separate HDR and SDR picture presets, so you have to throw away one. And unfortunately, if I make SDR settings, it will literally follow through into HDR. There's no separation until you get to Dolby Vision, which is very stupid. That's, again, one of the big downsides with TCL. Samsung does not have that problem, so we're able to set up an HDR profile that's separate from SDR. So again, I just chose the sports preset because the sports preset is one that I will never miss. Since I don't watch sports, that won't hurt me. Now, looking at it, you can clearly see what I'm talking about when I say there are moments where the TCL color can just be richer than the Samsung. And this is at this point, this is where I totally feel a type of way. I'm like, okay, let me get this straight. I paid $25.99 plus tax for this freaking TV, and you mean to tell me this $499 TV is actually giving me an example of color where HDR looks richer? I mean, look at the three-dimensionality on Gwen. Her hood pops more, the colors pop more. This is just more pale by comparison and more faded by comparison. It's ridiculous. If you told me this was the S95D and this was the TCL, I'd believe it because of the lack of contrast on the Samsung S95D comparatively to what TCL is putting out. This is a testament that TCL absolutely does know how to render contrast. They just have to really work on their highlight mapping for SDR and a bunch of other things as far as their colors and things like that. But this is really impressive, and let this image sink in because it really does speak 1,000 words of volume into what you could really get with some high quality settings. In this example, you can see how identical the two TVs look, with again the TCL coming out with the overall richer representation of color and Samsung looking more pale by comparison. Again, I don't know how TCL is pulling this off. And I think it deserves all kinds of merit because what the hell? In a scene like this, where there's a lot of geometry and a lot of varying shades of color, wide array of color, it's just outperforming and outpacing the Samsung. And it's to the point where if it had the extra brightness, this probably would beat the Samsung for this particular scene. But because it's a little bit dimmer, the HDR impact can be felt better on the S95D and things like, again, the brightness of the windows and things like that. But honestly speaking, if I'm being completely transparent here, in this particular example, the only thing that the Samsung is offering, really, honestly, is just better brightness. Because as you look in the background, TCL is retaining the background information even through the window, where Samsung is making that really washed out and clipped. So their claims of being, great at their real depth enhancement technology not really holding up here, because depth is not just the foreground, it's also the background, and TCL in this example is actually doing a better job. How insane is that? Now, in this example, the only way we could really get anywhere close to what TCL is offering is if we change Samsung's their tone mapping to static from active, and that reduces the brightness substantially. However, if you notice, we still have richer detail in the background on the TCL, and that is just weird. However, colors do get a bit richer on the Samsung, as we can clearly see in the background, so it does have the capability of doing that. But if you notice around Miles Morales' face, you just have a clarity that just does not exist, factually does not exist on Miles Morales' face here. You can look at the dad, more of the same. And then again, you're getting more highlight detail too, coming in right here, that over here, it's just a bit more muted by example. And that is just the weirdest thing to me. I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna try to zoom out just a little bit because I feel like I'm clipping a little bit of the image off. Try to move it over just a little bit so we can see it a little bit better. And there you go. You can it's clear as day. That is the brighter image of that. So even when you tone down the brightness, that doesn't do you any damn favors, because not only are you missing key peak highlights like you have here, now that's all dim. And it's so stupid. I am blown back by TCL giving a $2,599 television a run for its money. Like, can we see, like, dude, I'm freaking out. I'm like, what the hell, man? This is like a sleeper hit, the likes of which we haven't seen in years. Now, what I've found is that the only real way that you can actually benefit from the extra contrast of the QD OLED is if you lower brightness. And I mean, literally change your HDR peak luminance to medium from high. That is the only way. And who would buy the S95D to do that? So we're clearly seeing the TCL is pushing the Samsung up against the rope so hard to the point where the only way you can get close to this level of contrast, I mean, look at that, is if you lower it to medium. Even then, you still miss that level of contrast. Look at how freaking blurry this is. That is ridiculous. It's so blurry. Where over here, crystal clear. You would think that this is the Samsung S95D. And just so everybody can see that I'm not playing any games, we're going to, in real time with the TCL remote, just open up the menu real quick so you can see that's the TCL. Like, what in the hell is going on? I mean, this is a mind-blowing comparison showing me, like, just how far TCL has come in a very short period of time. Again, I understand my settings are making the difference here, but still it is possible, and I think that has its own merit. And yes, I do have HDR settings that will be going up after this video, so if you have a TCL Q7M, rejoice because you're about to get this amazing experience on your set as well. I gotta say this, man, looking at Our Planet, okay, on Netflix, this is, I guess, the episode called Horizon, it is very, very clear, very, very clear that TCL is just doing something extra for processing that is just not happening on the Samsung in terms of preserving color. Because look at all of the ambient light on these birds here, the water's richness, the background detail. Here, it's blurry, you can't really see it. And again, the water, not as rich. The birds, not as rich. On a sunset kind of dusk look, that is just not accurate or correct in any way, shape, and or form. And the fact is, Samsung wants a whole hell of a lot more money for less result in this example. We've seen a couple examples already where TCL is not only richer for color, but has more contrast in the QD OLED. Like, what the fuck? Like, I'm blown away by this right now. Like, and you can't even say, oh, it's because you're going at an angle, because that's a QD OLED, and I'm not really at that much of an angle. It's just barrel distortion. And again, we're pretty much straight on with both TVs kind of meeting in the middle here. So there's really no way, if anything, you could say this is more unfair to the TCL because it's at more of an angle than the Samsung. And the Samsung is still getting absolutely baked. Like, what the I'm blown back. Like, I can't with this right now. 11 minutes, 57 seconds into Horizon here, okay? Our Planet Horizon or whatever it is, I don't know. You can clearly see it. When chaos erupts in this scene, look at how much detail. I mean, that is like photorealistic over there with like the level of contrast, and over here, not so much. Look at the horizon back there, all the rock formations, and look back here, how blurry everything is. You can't really see the water kicking up. You can there. Wow. Just literally just wow. Samsung finally redeems themselves a little bit in this example, and that you have an accurate color of the sky, which is fantastic. But if you look, the highlight detail coming off of the TCL is literally match for match with the Samsung, and then some, because you have the detail in the clouds that are just to die for. I mean, you're on par with QD OLED level. Like, this is mind-blowing. Now, it gets a little better for Samsung again once we start looking at white balance, again, of like a forest of dead trees. You can kind of see it looks a lot more realistic. You have a lot more of a warmth that you'd have, where this is just too damn green. It doesn't really look that green. You lose a lot of the accuracy and the sky blue quality that you'd have. So again, you are having some issues here. However, come on, is it really a $2,000 difference? No. I mean, I'm going to be honest, no, it's not. And I own this TV. I'm fucking still paying on this TV. And it's not a $2,000 difference. Like, that, I mean, like, the TCL is a damn win. I don't care who you are if you like HDR. I just got to put that out there. I mean, yes, it runs way too damn cool. And if they could somehow figure out a way to warm it up, I mean, it would be like slam dunk. It's kind of over because the quality of colors, the contrast, forget about it. In HDR, it's really up there. Like, it really is. Take this scene, for example. I'm not even shitting you. I'm kind of speechless. I didn't see this going this way, but TCL has better color by a lot. I can see every single shade of color despite it not having the greatest brightness. And Samsung's just over brightening this way, way too much. Like, way too much. And I'm just looking at this and I'm like, holy shit, man. Like, it's actually getting pretty spanked right now. It's losing out in that quality that it needs to have. I mean, there are no words. There are no words to justify what we're seeing here. I mean, you're talking, people say, oh, you always get what you pay for, and then you're seeing what's happening here. And again, on the TCL, I'll show you what the TCL looks like out of the box, right? So if you go out of the box, this is what your TCL is going to look like. It ain't that impressive, and everybody's going to be like, well, yeah, Samsung obviously has the aptitude to go higher, right? Obviously, TCL is cheap and you get what you pay for, but even if you pay close attention, you can still see more detail on the TCL than you can on the Samsung. And then what's even more impressive is like when you go to IMAX Enhanced, it still looks like shit, but you still have the detail that Samsung is tossing away here, which is kind of ridiculous when you think about it. Now, then we go into, let's say, our HDR mode. I mean, it's a day and night difference. So again, my HDR settings are making the difference here, but I didn't expect it to be this big. I mean, and here's yet another example of superior contrast on the TCL Q7M versus the Samsung S95D. I mean, like, I'm not gonna lie, the way I'm feeling right now, I feel like this is some baby back bullshit. Like, I really, really feel a type of way about this right now, to the point where I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, how, Samsung, are you getting your ass handed to you for this HDR example with real world content? I'm on Netflix, you know, and it's just, it's such a slaughter. It's such a slaughter. It's terrible right now what's happening for Samsung. Like, it's horrible. I mean, they're not preserving the color. They're not preserving the level of contrast they need to, and they're getting beaten by a $500 TV. What the fuck? For HDR, like, at least as far as the clarity aspect of it. Now, brightness, they have that all day, every day. But again, brightness isn't the only story. And this is why I always shy away when people say, oh, brighter is better. Because it's not always, as you're clearly seeing. And literally yet another example. I mean, literally yet another example. Look at the school of fish, how clear it is, all the gradients of color. And for anyone thinking I'm bullshitting and I'm just making the Samsung look bad to fluff up the TCL, I have no reason to do so. I mean, look at what happens when you go to all the other picture modes. You go to Eco, you go to Movie, which is okay, a little bit better. You go to Filmmaker mode, it doesn't look great. And then you go to what I did. Literally, from this to this, it is a day and night difference, and work clearly has been done to the Samsung. However, when faced with what TCL is doing from a processing standpoint in HDR, good fucking luck. Look at the amount of clipping and how pale the image is, and how you can't see the coral reef behind the fish comparatively to what you have here. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, it's insane that we even have this level of difference between the two. Like, seriously. Then we look at this scene. As the waves come crashing in, you can see more realistic gradients, where the Samsung, again, more pale and lacking those realistic gradients. And again, here we are in Arcane, and you see just how three-dimensional the image looks because of the level of contrast versus a little bit more two-dimensional on the Samsung. Unfortunately, so many people will let the brightness of this face be like, oh wow, that's amazing, that's wonderful, that's the whole story, and ignore the quality that we're getting right here, which is just asinine, because look at the differences. Now, for people saying I could just lower the brightness of the Samsung and that would solve all our problems, let's go ahead and show you. Brightness goes down, and it's not solving all the problems. You're at brightness 23. I don't know anybody that rocked their Samsung S95D at 23, and we still don't have the level of detail that we have on the TCL. It's literally like you've got to dim it down all the way. Like, and even then you still don't have the same level of detail, even when you go to literally 1 on your brightness. So people trying to say, oh, it's because it's overly bright and you have it at 100. No, it literally just doesn't have that level of detail. Now, for those smart guys out there that says, well, you should lower contrast as well. Well, you could try that as well. And it's not until you get to about 18 on your contrast, because I've already tried this, that you start to see the details kind of equal what we have on the TCL, but you'd really have to go way down to like 9 on your contrast before you have the same level of detail, more or less, that you have on the TCL. That's ridiculous, because TCL is nowhere near those levels of low. That lets you know how washed the image is for HDR, particularly comparatively to the TCL, and what they're doing for their contrast is just way higher than what Samsung's doing. So I don't know if it's the firmware that I'm on, just so everybody can know what firmware I'm on the Samsung. I'm going to show you, okay? I'm on firmware 1201, okay? I don't know if it's this firmware or whatever, but it's just not mapping highlights correctly at all. You clearly see the over brightening right in here, way too damn bright. Here, that's not happening. You're getting the richness, the contrast, the clarity, all that stuff that's just falling through your fingers on the Samsung. And the only way around it is to select static, and it still doesn't look good. And it's just mind-blowing, because I never thought TCL would put up this much of a damn fight against a TV, $2,000 more expensive than it is right now. And this isn't even the flagship model, so very impressive stuff. But that being said, I don't know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments down below, and thanks as always for watching the #1 brand in honesty. But until the next video, this shit's ridiculous.